birthday to baby.
This was Marie Gergich's last birthday with her mother. 3 months later, in November 2016, Denise Marie Claire would pass away from uterine cancer, a situation made worse, Gergich says, by the cost of cancer and 2 years of hospital visits.
That really takes a toll. We're already going through this, and now we're having to worry about paying for parking.
Even now, Gergich still worries about hospital parking fees. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in November 2022 and says she paid about $400 every month during radiation and chemo. Gergich says eliminating the cost of parking would lift a burden off of families.
It would have made a great deal of difference to my father, who, was not only grieving the passing of my mother, he had to sell assets. He sold his home. It really is heartbreaking.
We're talking about a tax on sick people.
Last week, NDP MPP Jeff Birch tabled a bill to get rid of parking fees at hospitals. It's the party's second attempt to eliminate them in less than a year, and some advocates say the move is long overdue.
In many towns, the hospital either is the only place where there are parking fees at all, or their rates are far above, municipal parking rates and so on.
But some say ending parking fees means hospitals would make less money, funds that go directly to their day-to-day operations, even if it only makes up less than 1% of their budget.
The provincial government should not get any credit for eliminating hospital parking fees unless they provide that backfill funding to the hospitals. And if they don't get that, whatever it is, 50, 100 million plus dollars in Ontario, that means that patients are going to get worse care.
Earlier this month in Nova Scotia, the government pledged to cover lost revenue from hospitals after choosing to scrap parking fees for all healthcare facilities. But in BC, paid parking was reintroduced in 2022 after 2 years of none, the province at the time saying non-hospital users were taking up parking spots.
You need to be able to validate people's parking in some way so it doesn't become a bit of chaos.
Some critics might call it a complicated issue, but others say free parking at hospitals still makes the most sense.
Why are we having to go into our retirement funds, our credit cards, our line of credits when we have an OHIP card? That's, baffles me.
Ontario's health minister wouldn't say when asked directly whether the government would be willing to support the bill, but said limits on parking charges already exist and the province is focused on investing in people, equipment, and capital. Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
In 2022, Janet Campbell thought she'd found a great deal, just under $1 million for a 5-bedroom pre-construction home in Brampton. The home advertised to her, part of a real housing project by Paradise Developments, sold to her by a man she was introduced to by a friend.
When he talked about it, it sounds so real and interesting, and it was something easy to do. So I said, well, why not?
But like others, she's now learned the deal was too good to be true. Back in 2022, CBC Toronto investigated what appeared to be a scam. People duped into paying deposits and signing purchase agreements with a company with a name nearly identical to the real developer, but with no actual affiliation or authorization to sell its homes, as well as signing mortgages with a phony private lender. At the time, one buyer's closing date had already come and gone, and she never got the home she was promised. But even after our investigation, the alleged scam hasn't stopped. Nearly 3 years later, one of the men at the center of it is now facing criminal charges and lawsuits. Lawyer Andrew Ballantyne is representing 7 clients who altogether paid nearly $170,000 in deposits.
More than 2 years after the fact, this is still happening. One of the clients who I now have signed their purchase agreement in May of last year. So this isn't something that, stopped. They didn't stop taking deposits in 2022 when sort of pressure, I would imagine, pressure started to mount for them.
That lawsuit alleges Moise Kunwar of Brampton misrepresented himself and was directly involved in collecting deposits. In a statement of defense filed last week, Kunwar's lawyer says he denies allegations of fraud, saying he was simply acting as a sales associate, making reference in the defense to his superiors, and that he believed the transactions were lawful and legitimate, though he admits he did represent himself as president of a company that would offer mortgage financing. That company is not registered in Ontario. The statement of defense also says Kunwar partially refunded 3 of the plaintiffs. There's also another lawsuit from an alleged victim out nearly $100,000. And Kunwar's also now facing criminal charges for allegedly defrauding yet another victim, also related to a real estate transaction. Kunwar has not responded to our questions about those allegations. Campbell says Kunwar had seemed trustworthy and truthful. Despite repeated delays and various promises, it was only recently she finally realized she wouldn't be getting the home she dreamed of.
He took me to the site to see the home, but it wasn't my home. I don't know whose home it was, but it wasn't mine.
Now she says her savings are gone, and so is her sense of trust. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.